I'd like to begin by recognizing that the conditions in Ontario's correctional system have been unattainable for far too long. From the avoidable homicide of Solomon Faqiri in 2016, to the mass abuses of workers and the collapse of murder trials surrounding the Maplehurst scandal, realizing community safety in Ontario demands so much more from the government. Today, we are announcing that the Ontario NDP will be introducing a bill entitled Safety and Accountability in Corrections Act this coming Monday. It will give people in Ontario hope for a real sense of community safety. Let me be clear. Ontarians don't have to accept the degradation of corrections workers or inmates in the corrections system. In 2018, the province of Ontario took a significant step toward that path. Our new NDP bill will build on that step by committing the government to a plan to implement what has already been passed, the 2018 Corrections Services Transformation Act. That bill would have done many things, but its biggest change would have been the creation of an Inspector General for Corrections. The Inspector General would function like a specialized and empowered ombudsman for Ontario's corrections system. Reminder here that needs to be said. The 2018 Corrections Services Transformation Act is already on the books. It contains significant provisions that are simply not in force and in effect. This is something that is sitting on the government's desks and something that they can enact today. We are tabling this bill to put pressure on the government to make sure that this change before the 2018 bill sunsets at its 10-year mark. We have to fix the gaps that were left behind by the Ontario Liberals by adding substantial new protections for the corrections workers who act as whistleblowers in the corrections system. Furthermore, the new Ontario NDP bill will give the Inspector General of Corrections even stronger powers to compel witnesses and investigate management neglect that ignores the cries for help from frontline workers in Ontario's corrections system. It goes even further, making recommendations to improve the resourcing of food, healthcare professionals, and even mental health services for corrections officers. Finally, the bill will allow for the creation of an online dashboard to report on how overcapacity in Ontario's correctional facilities varies throughout the year. We know that access to information, just like that through the FOIs and other means, is a necessary tool for transparency and accountability. Since the 2018 bill was passed, the conditions facing inmates and correction workers have gone significantly worse. In 2018, under the Liberals, 71% of inmates were stuck in corrections awaiting pre-trial, an increase from 60% in 2004. The alarm bells had already been ringing then. But today, that number has climbed to over 83%. And despite the government's attempts to talk about their new funding, what we have seen is that the Ford government has failed to bring those numbers down. This issue cannot be partisan. Every elected person in Ontario owes it to the people that sent them here to Queen's Park to put aside the partisanship. We must come together to work to build community safety for everyone in our province. Ontario's Ombudsman, Paul Dubé, as he retired, warned that complaints about corrections surged by 55% to nearly 7,000 complaints in last year alone. He implored every single elected person that the crisis, and I quote, that the crisis in Ontario's correctional facilities remains one of the most urgent public policy challenges facing the province today, and one that demands immediate and decisive action. We hope that this bill will answer his call for change and answer the calls for change from corrections workers and inmates. that have been ignored far too long in our system. Today, you will hear from some of the most important voices for change and justice in Ontario corrections and the importance of why advancing our bill is so critical. We know that the Corrections Services Transformation Act doesn't go far enough, but we have a chance to correct that. We also want to make sure that that bill doesn't go to waste. You will hear from Emily Coyle from the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies of Canada and Yusuf Faqiri, the brother of the late Solomon Faqiri, whose homicide in an Ontario jail has sparked a movement demanding that people in mental health crisis receive treatment in mental health facilities instead of jails. The official opposition Ontario NDP stands firmly with Yusuf Faqiri and the Faqiri family and all their friends, and reiterate their rightful call for an apology from the Solicitor General of Ontario, the Premier of Ontario, and their government's failure to protect and save the life of Solomon Faqiri while he was in government custody. They are owed an apology. They are owed that apology now. Thank you. I would like to invite Yusuf Faqiri to take the podium.
Good morning to my dear Ontarians across the province and to fellow Canadians and to all members of government in Ontario. I come here today as the brother of Suleiman Faqiri, but I come here today as someone who's asking the government once again for bringing change in corrections for individuals suffering from mental health challenges. It has been 870 days, 124 weeks, and 28 months since the landmark homicide verdict into Solomon Faqiri's death in the coroner's inquest that gave 57 recommendations. Yet to this day, the government has not implemented any of the recommendations. Specifically, the most important one, I would argue, is that inspectorate that this bill is calling for. And it has been almost more than 9 years since Suleiman's tragic death, and the government to this day has not acknowledged his death. And it has been many other deaths since that coroner's inquest, including the tragedy of Yuplano Cusano and Ibrahim Ali, who both suffer from mental health challenges, who both lost their lives at a correctional facility. I'm here today, ladies and gentlemen, to say to all of you, especially our Premier and our Solicitor General, that this bill is an opportunity to stand on the right side of history, that this bill is an opportunity to transform corrections, and that this bill is also an opportunity for correctional officers, the unions representing the correctional officers, for us to come work together into transforming corrections to help individuals suffering from mental health challenges. Suleiman's not here with us anymore, but there's many Suleimans that are inside our correctional systems that suffer from mental health challenges. They need your leadership. They need your support. This is not an issue of a partisanship. This is an issue that affects all of us. This bill, this inspectorate specifically, is an opportunity to create an accountability mechanism that does not exist in anywhere else in our country when it comes to correctional and the correctional system. And it's an opportunity for us to really make a commitment to saving the lives of our most vulnerable. And this is why it's so important for us to bring this change. This bill is an opportunity of providing real concrete solutions to the crisis that exists in corrections. As I said many months ago, and as I continue to say, my door is open from the Premier, to the Solicitor General, and to other correctional officers for my family to work with you in transforming the system. But silence is not the answer. Not acknowledging my brother's death publicly and apologizing for his death is not the answer. I will continue to stand. I will continue to speak until we receive that public apology. I will continue to stand until we transform the system, because it is about life and death. I come here today as the brother of a man who did not have an opportunity to meet his nephew, Suleiman, who was born a few months ago, which was taken away from him. But I come here today to implore our leaders, bring this change, save the lives of the ones that are with us, And Suleiman would have wanted nothing but that. And that you need to acknowledge his death for what happened to him. And that public apology is a start. And that this bill can bring a profound opportunity for us to bring that change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Emily?
I'm speaking today as the co-executive director of an organization called the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies. But in addition to that, I'm also a longtime friend and supporter of the Faqiri family. Through our work and the work of the member societies of the Elizabeth Fry Network, we're intimately aware of what is happening in Ontario's jails and prisons. We hear directly from people who are incarcerated, from families trying to reach their loved ones, and also frequently from frontline workers. Based on that daily lived experience, I want to be very clear. Conditions in Ontario's and Canada's jails and prisons have never been worse. Overcrowding, prolonged and routine lockdowns, and a lack of access to both adequate physical and mental health care are now very standard conditions of confinement that we see. People are spending days, and I say people very deliberately because we cannot call the people who are in prisons a word like inmate or offender and other them in a way that makes them less human. So those people who are in our prisons and jails are spending days locked in cells. They are missing court appointments and they are deteriorating in isolation. And this is not an abstract policy problem. It's a daily reality that we are witnessing across the province and across other provinces. One of the most alarming facts that you've already heard, and I want to underscore, and one that we speak about often, is that more than 83% of people in Ontario jails are legally innocent, and they are awaiting trial. These are not people serving sentences. They are simply being held because they have been denied bail. And it is critical to understand why people are denied bail. It's rarely about public safety. People are denied bail because they are poor. People are denied bail because they have addictions. People are denied bail because they are suffering from mental health disabilities, lack of community supports, and because they do not have a surety, or because the system has failed to provide the very supports that would allow for a safe release. In other words, people are jailed for systemic failures overall, not individual risk by and large. Holding people in custody under these conditions causes enormous harms. It destabilizes their employment, their housing, and family relationships, making people less safe, not more, when they are eventually released. It also places immense strain on already overwhelmed jails and staff. It is also important to say plainly, it's far cheaper to support people in the community on bail than it is to hold them in jail. Pretrial detention is one of the most expensive and the least effective ways that we have, and yet it is being used at record levels. Again, this is a policy choice and it is a harmful one. The death of Suleiman Faqiri, unfortunately, was not an isolated tragedy. It was a predictable result of a system that has ignored repeated warnings for years, and we would say even decades, as conditions of confinement become more dangerous and less humane. Despite oversight mechanisms and legal frameworks existing on paper, people have continued to be subjected to conditions that any reasonable person would recognize as unsafe. Importantly, as you've already heard, the coroner's inquest into Suleiman Faqiri's death explicitly recommended that the province apologize to the Faqiri family. That recommendation is not symbolic or optional. It was about accountability, and it was about dignity, and it was about acknowledging preventable harm identified through this official public process, the coroner's inquest. And can I say, an apology is not a political choice. It's a human thing to do. It's the right thing to do because Suleiman's life mattered and his death was avoidable, and this system failed in its most basic duty of care. Our accountability, all of us in Ontario, means listening to families and means respecting the findings of inquests and oversight bodies, and it means being willing to acknowledge harm when harm has occurred. Families like the Faqiris should never have to spend years fighting just to be acknowledged. Apologizing does not undo what happened, but it is a necessary first step toward restoring dignity and rebuilding trust. What we are seeing now in Ontario's jails makes it all the more urgent.
Thank you. Thank you to Emily as well as to Yusuf. The issue that we are bringing forward is not new. It is one that has dominated a number of headline articles, and it's one that is leading to deteriorating conditions in corrections. We're happy to take questions from the media at this point.
Hi, I'll ask in English, but feel free to answer in French as well. You've mentioned yourselves that the Ombudsman does report on the jail. So what do you think the Inspectorate will be able to do that the Ombudsman can't?
Thank you very much for that question. The Inspector General, as prescribed in the bill, is to have complete oversight over corrections, and that will be their sole job. We have an Inspector General over policing, so it will be comparable to that. The Inspector General will be able to go in to facilities, inspect, listen to whistleblowers, do follow-up, compel witnesses, and make key recommendations, and they will have a relationship that is specifically to that about accountability in corrections. And so this is something that has been identified. This mechanism has been identified as absolutely important, simply because the Ombudsman himself has many other responsibilities, but the responsibility for the Inspector General of Corrections will be solely to ensure that the corrections system is working as it should. And happy to welcome others to the podium to answer that.
Okay, sure, yeah. I'll go
Okay.
with you.
I'm not sure if you've seen this, but federally there is a correctional investigator. The past correctional investigator's name was Ivan Zinger. Dr. Ivan Zinger just stepped down 2 years early from his role as ombudsperson for the federal prisons. And he did that because year over year, the correctional investigator has been bringing recommendations forward to the federal government that are not acted upon. So there is no requirement to have binding recommendations. And so similarly in Ontario's jails, you will have an ombudsperson who can bring forward some recommendations, but often they're not acted upon. So having another level of accountability is extremely important. The Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies has been calling for the federal government to ratify an international mechanism called the Optional Protocol Against Torture. And this would allow also for another level of oversight in all places of detention, including provincial jails. So anytime that you see a call for more oversight and more binding recommendations, it's going to be something that will benefit all of us in terms of our public safety.
I'll respond in French. Une des choses qui était très important, le bureau de
A problem that is very important is that the Ombudsman Office in Ontario is actually important for the regulations and recommendations, but in this office, they will have more power in the way that they cannot constrain, they cannot oblige people to regulate in a more regular way, because the Ombudsman Office can introduce complaints, but they cannot impose actions. That's why this bill is transformative, and this is actually the office that will be able to change the correctional system, because now this office and this bill will be able to change the system. This is very important, and this is a difference that does not exist only for the Ombudsman Office, because with the Ombudsman Office, we see they have done a lot of work, they have done a good job, but the problem is they cannot impose change, and this is a very important change. This is a very important element that will be able to bring change.
Important thing about our bill is to strengthen what is on the table already from 2018. We know that it's very difficult to get information about what's happening inside corrections, which is why our bill is also calling for the creation of the online dashboard to take a look at the conditions inside the correction facilities, also to ensure that that information is timely and widely accessible. We know that the tools of what we have had are now gone, such as the freedom of information requests. You don't have that tool anymore. We will not be able to know what's happening inside corrections. The other thing of note is that, we're going to be strengthening the powers that the Inspector General has, so it will go beyond what an ombudsman can do. And I think that it's very specific to the fact that we need to have dedicated resources in an accountability office for a system that's so broken and damaged. Further to that, we also have whistleblower protection. We know from experience, and I think Elizabeth can probably speak to this, is that many corrections officers, frontline officers, have talked about the horrible working conditions that they have. They have cited that inmates are not safe. They themselves are not safe. There's escalating violence. We have heard from physicians who are treating those people who are in government custody, and they have cited the fact that things have just gotten significantly worse. So having whistleblower protection will allow the corrections workers and anyone who's working in corrections to be able to speak up and call for real accountability without punishment from the government. And we know that this government has been trying to hide from their record. But, I want to be really clear is that, we have a problem, a significant crisis, a humanitarian disaster that's taking place in jails and detention centers. We cannot allow this to be prolonged. The government has had the Corrections Services Transformation Act on their desks since 2018. Legislation that is not brought into full force and effect will sunset. It will be rendered a waste. And we're running against the clock at this point in time because by 2028, that bill will no longer be useful to us. So we will be in exactly the same spot that we were in this province as if nothing has been done. And perhaps that is the government's intention, is to run the clock and not to do anything. But I think that real people, their suffering, their well-being, and families are affected. And ultimately, people are not coming out of these facilities, rehabilitated. And the rates of recidivism are very high. So this is a very expensive and wasteful exercise, and it's highly inefficient. And we need to urgently fix it.
And I'm not sure if this has been asked, but we know that private members' bills rarely pass, especially from an opposition member. I mean, what are you hoping will come from this?
Thank you, and you're right. We have seen a government, play political games where even doing the right thing, they won't do. And they'll oftentimes tell us it's a good bill, but we're not going to take it up. We're really trying to appeal to the Premier, the Solicitor General, is that they have a crisis on their hands. It's happening and getting worse on their watch. If they want to take all the contents of the bill and make it their own, I welcome to do that. I won't stand at this podium anymore. I won't speak about it as long as they do their work. While they don't do their work, we're compelled to continue to come in and speak up. The 2018 Corrections Services Transformation Act started off as a Liberal bill. I'm here as the official opposition on Ontario NDP. That bill contains significant changes to the corrections facilities. I'm saying that we can go a little bit further. So Premier Doug Ford has both options in front of him, and all he needs to do is enact it.
Sorry if I can, just similarly for Mr. Faqiri, I know this has been a very long, heartbreaking journey for you. I mean, what is it like for you knowing that this is an opposition private member's bill? It may not go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's an important question, but I think that's your question is a second part to my response, is that whether it goes anywhere or not, I think obviously it needs to go somewhere. But even if it doesn't, I'm here to show my presence on behalf of not just Suleiman's brother or Suleiman's mother or the entire Faqiri family, but to know that this is the face of what the correctional system has done to families. This is the face of what the correctional system continues to do with families, right? And this is not in a combative tone, but to let the Premier know and the Solicitor General that my family is here to work with you, right? I'm not here to make this a partisan issue. I'm here to say I'm here, and we're here to work with you to make the system. Now, if you want to ignore that, we'll still be here. And I think this is very important. As Kristen just said, and as my dear friend Emily Coyle said, we have a crisis. I don't want to be here. I visit my brother's grave every Friday when I see him to give him my regards. And it reminds me of why I need to do this work, because it's a promise that I made to Suleiman when I buried him with my own hands almost more than 9 years ago, that I would not let his death be the last part of his chapter. And so I think this is what's important, right? Whether government wants to make this a partisan issue, that's not on me. I'm not here to make this a partisan issue. And I think that's what's important. And Suleiman's legacy for me will be to continue to help the individuals that are alive with us. And that's what motivates me.
Can I just say one thing to that? It's really important that we understand that people are being tortured and killed in our jails and prisons. And Canadians really pride themselves on our human rights record, whether it's domestically or globally. And when we have people who are innocent sitting in our jails, who are, in cells that are covered in blood, feces, urine, and vomit, who are locked down in those cells, sometimes 3-4 to a cell, and who are being killed, then we have a major problem on our hands that goes way beyond partisan politics, and it requires everybody to work together to solve it.
I'm wondering, a lot of the issues in the jails are also linked to overcrowding. Do you think that the government's plan to massively invest in expanding the jails will do anything to help that?
I think you both.
Yeah. Okay. You go first.
Yeah,
go
sure.
first.
In my remarks, I talked about how there are very inexpensive solutions that are already available, which is investing in bail programming in community. At one time, I was in a press conference and I let people know that there were no bail beds available to Indigenous women in all of Toronto. And so if you really want to invest in a cheaper and better solution, you're going to be investing in community-based solutions rather than building more jails.
I think that if building more jails was to make a country safer, then the United States would be the safest country in the world. And clearly this government, the Doug Ford government, is taking a page from the US, but he's not looking at the results. Ultimately, we are seeing the crowding and the overcrowding in corrections that is leading to detrimental effects. People are leaving those facilities more traumatized and more harmed than they entered. There's no space for programs for rehabilitation. We've heard this from whistleblowers who've come forward, corrections staff who have complained to us and said that their hearts are broken because they can't help people who are in government detention in those facilities because of the frequent lockdowns, because of the overcrowding, and also the fact that the staff morale is now so low. So this is a very expensive proposition, as Emily has alluded to, and we don't have finite dollars. And the lives that are lost in corrections, not just for those who are who are classified as inmates, but also for the workers and the administrators who are there. Everyone is stuck in the system, and the solutions have got to come from this government. So yes, I'm a member of the opposition, and yes, I have the right to table private members' bill, but it is the responsibility of the government to act, and this government has not acted.
Just want to add one thing, both in English and French. I think pumping money into an issue does not directly resolve the issue. It's about investing through the advice of the policymakers that know what they're talking about. In the case federally, we talked. Emily just talked about Ivan Singer, but provincially, the advice of the Howard Sapers, right? The individuals that know the system, government taking the appropriate advice from these individuals, right? And then doing the appropriate investment, right? Pumping $200 million, whatever amount, into the system is not going to resolve. It's about making informed policy decisions. Ce qui est très important, à mon avis, ça rien.
What is really important is that this has no importance. It is not important to inject just $200 million in the system. What counts is to make decisions which would be, which would concern people who know the system, who can make political analysis, who can know what to do. This is the most important thing. It has nothing to see with just inject money in the system. What is important is make the political decisions and which are based on analysis of people who know the system well. This is what counts. And today, as Christine and Emily said, we have a crisis on our hands. We have a crisis because today this person is alive and tomorrow maybe he's going to be in a body bag and he's going to be buried. So today, we need to make the right decisions, especially in the provincial system. We have a problem, we have a crisis, we need to solve this crisis, and this has nothing to see with political allegiance.
Thank you very much. Ontarians have been calling for community safety. We need to have a justice system that works, courts and trials that are flowing through quickly, correction facilities that actually do their job, which enables someone to come out rehabilitated. All of it is necessary, and unfortunately in Ontario, it's all broken. Okay. Thank you very much.